Let's get the headlines from Mike Garofalo. Mike?
You got it, Greg. 1 year after the nation was brought to a near standstill by the coronavirus, President Joe Biden used his first primetime address Thursday night to announce his plans to make all adults vaccine eligible by May 1st. He also wants Americans to begin to mark our independence from this virus by the 4th of July.
All of you asking when things will get back to normal, here is the truth. The only way to get our lives back, to get our economy back on track, is to beat the virus. You've been hearing me say that for while I was running and the last 50 days I've been president. But this is one of the most complex operations we've ever undertaken as a nation in a long time. That's why I'm using every power I have as President of the United States to put us on a war footing to get the job done. Sounds like hyperbole, but I mean it, a war footing. And thank God we're making some real progress now.
Speaking in the White House East Room, President Biden announced moves to speed vaccinations, including lifting eligibility qualifications, deploying an additional 4,000 active duty troops to support vaccination efforts, and allowing more people such as medical students, veterinarians, and dentists to deliver shots. He's also directing more doses towards some 950 community health centers and up to 20,000 retail pharmacies to make it easier for people to get vaccinated closer to their homes. And the president wrapped up his 24-minute address by urging Americans to stay united and stick with the rules. He voiced optimism that the nation will edge toward a semblance of normalcy in the coming months, noting there is hope and light of better days ahead if we all do our part.
I'll tell you the truth. A July 4th with your loved ones is the goal. But a lot can happen. Conditions can change. The scientists have made clear that things may get worse again as new variants of the virus spread. We've got work to do to ensure that everyone has confidence in the safety and effectiveness of all three vaccines. So my message to you is this: listen to Dr. Fauci.
But the president also warned that we may have to reinstate restrictions if Americans fail to commit to stay vigilant, social distancing and other precautions to help stem the virus growth and spreading. And during his first public address, President Joe Biden struck a more somber tone than that of his predecessor. Check it out.
It's the details of life that matter the most. And we miss those details. The big details and the small moments. Weddings, birthdays, graduations, all the things that needed to happen, but didn't. The first date, the family reunions, the Sunday night rituals. It's all has exacted a terrible cost on the psyche of so many of us.
President Biden also took the chance to denounce violent attacks against Asian Americans that have risen since the pandemic began. Greg, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Mike. I want to bring Tim Barton in now, Victory News contributor, president of Wallbuilders, a national pro-family organization presenting America's forgotten history and constitutional heritage. All right, Tim, let me wake you up from that. Thank you for joining us today. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, good to be with you guys. Anytime the government tells us that if we do what they say, then they're going to give us measures of freedom, I'm going to be skeptical. Certainly recognizing that, if you're in the middle of a pandemic, the government maybe has better intelligence, better information. Maybe they're tracking the science at a level higher than some Americans are. And so they can give us better information to make decisions with. But government's role is not to tell Americans what they can and can't do as much as to protect their God-given rights. Go back and read the Declaration of Independence. The founding fathers said that government exists to secure our inalienable God-given rights. So there's always going to be levels of skepticism in what's going on. Also, the tone and the attitude sounded very defeated. It sounded almost Jimmy Carter-esque, that America just is in for bad days and hard days and rough days. And what we know is that certainly there can be challenges ahead of us, but with good leadership and good decisions, that America's brightest days can still be ahead of us. And that's certainly not the message that seemed to be resounding last night from President Biden.
Well, I was just glad he wasn't my pastor. I thought I'd hate to hear that on Sundays. As he was talking, he said, and to me, this is what struck to me, that he's that out of touch, or the Beltway's that out of touch with America, that by July the 4th, Independence Day, we will be able to meet in small groups in our yard. We can do that now, can't we?
Right. Yeah. According to the CDC website, as of today, on the CDC website, they say if you're vaccinated, you're free to hang out with other vaccinated people, that you can hang out with your family. And as long as you're vaccinated and you're in a small group of people, then and people that have not been symptomatic, then you're okay as well. Now, I would say we could go even further than that, but that's the CDC is already saying that today. And Biden is saying that, well, maybe by July 4th, you can do the things the CDC is already saying you can do today. So even though I don't always trust the CDC, quote unquote, science, even their scientists saying we already can do some of these things today. And certainly the reality is it's supposed to be up to the states to make decisions. And then states should trust people. People can make wise and good decisions. If you're in a situation where you have immune health deficiencies, where you have underlying pre-existing conditions, you need to be wise and be safe. And we want to be careful and helpful of those around us. But if you're healthy and you're young, and for me, I already had COVID and I've been tested. I have the antibodies. So if I have the antibodies, not only can I not get it, I can't spread it with anybody else. There's a lot of nuance and details left out. And certainly this is already contrary to what the CDC is saying even right now.
Right. Well, we don't want to play on people's fears. And I want to thank you so much for that analysis. I want to bring you back in here in just a moment. Illegal immigration and even creating an environment that's ripe for organized crime. According to the report, Mexico's President Lopez Obrador says Central American nations, Joe Biden as the migrant president, and they feel they're going to reach the United States with him there. Some alarming numbers when it comes to migrant families crossing the border. The Washington Times is reporting the families are testing positive for the coronavirus at a rate between 3 to 10 times the rate of the U.S. population. The Times is reporting that ICE says the positivity rate is between 5 and 10%. Brownsville officials here in Texas say they are seeing a 12% positivity rate, while those in Harlingen, Texas, homeless shelters are seeing rates as high as 25%. Some of the families are reportedly being quarantined. Most are just being sent somewhere else in the United States. To help us explore this and other issues, I want to welcome to Victory News Congressman Jody Hice, who represents the 10th Congressional District of Georgia. Congressman Hice, welcome to Victory News.
My pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so much to unpack there. Let's go to the border first. The president says by July the 4th, we should be able to gather with friends, which we can do that now outside in most places in the United States. But he has created a crisis, the way I see it, in his policies on the border. Am I wrong?
Yeah, there's no question he's created a crisis. Look, he was handed a great situation on the southern border. Under the Obama administration, the border got out of control, an incredible crisis. President Trump inherited that. As we all know, he ran on building a wall and securing the border, and he did so. And as a result, by the time he left the White House, the border was in better shape than it's been in decades. And now in less than 3 months, President Biden has managed to totally unwrap that and turn it upside down. And now we are having a bigger, and people need to understand this, a bigger crisis at the border now than we ever had even at the peak of the problem during the Trump administration.
Continuing with Joe Biden, Joe Biden's border policies are concerning more than just Americans. Reuters is reporting that south of the border, the Mexican government sees the Biden administration's policies as promoting illegal immigration and even creating an environment that's ripe for organized crime. According to the report, Mexico's President Lopez Obrador says that Central American nations see Biden as the migrant president, and so many feel they are going to reach the United States now. Some alarming numbers when it comes to the migrant families crossing into our border. The Washington Times is reporting the families are testing positive for the coronavirus at between 3 and 10 times the rate of the United States population. The Times is reporting that ICE says the positivity rate is between 5 and 10%. Brownsville officials say Brownsville is in Texas, they are seeing a 12% positivity rate, while those in Harlingen, Texas, homeless shelters are seeing rates as high as 25%. Some of the families are reportedly being quarantined. Others are just being put on a bus and sent north into the country. To help us get a frontline look at growing crisis at the border, I want to welcome Cochise County, Arizona Sheriff Mark J. Daniels. Sheriff Daniels is a 36-year veteran of law enforcement who holds a master's degree in criminal justice management. Okay, Sheriff, welcome to Victory News. Tell us what's happening there on the front lines of the border.
Well, thanks for having me, Greg, and thanks for your viewers listening. You know, we're repeating history. In 2019, when the caravan and surges kicked in that 19, we saw tremendous numbers that created a crisis on our southwest border, which created a lot of the programs that President Trump put in office, the MPP program, where they stay in Mexico. Then we had COVID hit. Months after that was put the Title 42, which essential travel only into the United States. The numbers we're seeing now, 2,500 to 4,000 a day. Stressed out DHS resources where agents now are no longer securing the border. They're in Costco buying diapers and baby formula, and they're taking care of kids. So our border, the resources we've seen on our border, thanks to this administration's, and I say thank you in a cynical way, to this administration's executive orders, we are now seeing the pandemic, public safety pandemic that we saw in 2019. And Greg, to give you some stats on that, in 2019, the first 9 months, this southwest border was breached by 141 countries coming into our country. We had 1,000 gang members from 20 different countries. So we always think of Mexico and the Northern Triangle areas coming into our border for that better way of life. The media, the mainstream media likes to project the children. To give you an example on the children, in the Yuma sector alone, which is in my state, we had 3,500 children that were being exploited by the cartels. What that meant was they were coming across with adults, being released, they were expedited into the country, the children were sent back to Mexico, and it was repeated again. 3,500 kids that the United States government actually protected these children during the investigation. And along with that was 6,100 fraud families. So those are just a couple numbers that shows you what 2019 brought this country that mainstream media is not sharing. I'm glad you had me on today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for the facts and the truth. We want the truth. You sent us some photos, actual photos from there on the border. You're part of where you are sheriff is part of where the wall is, or where the wall was. It's now been stopped. I want to put those photos up, and then you tell me what we're looking at here.
The first photo that your viewers are looking at is a photo. When President Biden rescinded that the southwest border was no longer an emergency, it stopped construction on the southwest border for physical barrier, resources, technology, not just the barrier, but the technology. What you're seeing there, some of the new fence at the first photo you showed, was everything stopped. So we have holes in the wall, like you're seeing there. We have trenches, 6-foot trenches. We have infrastructure in mountainous areas that never was there before. And so it is a mess on the southwest border. These pictures you're showing now are smugglers off our camera system that we have seen.
Let me stop you. If you could leave that picture up right there. Now is that one of your border agents? Who is this guy with a rifle here?
No, that's part of the cartel. That's the cartel on the U.S. side off our camera system. We have our own camera system where he is scouting to get the illegal drugs. This is equipment that used by the cartels and scouts it's solar equipment. It's everything you want to do to bring smuggling into the United States. And this is equipment we have seized by my border team.
Okay, so they are armed. Nancy Pelosi was upset that supposedly people were armed coming into the Capitol building, but these people are armed and they're coming in. The cartels are the drug cartels. This is more than just a humanitarian crisis. There's also an environmental crisis if you're finding things laying out in the desert. Am I wrong?
No, you're exactly right on that, Greg. And, you know, sheriff's got 3 objectives: public safety, national security, and humanitarian. And then you can add on the global health pandemic that we're dealing with on the border too, that you just reported on. But when you have 16,000 violent criminals come through our southwest border in the first 9 months, you have 4,100 warrants that were turned over to sheriff's offices on the southwest border and 822 assaults against federal agents. Those are just a slice of a sample of what's going on the southwest border, that we are repeating that negative time in our history that we should have learned from instead of wanting to repeat it.
Okay, let me ask you one other question. Has anyone from the administration reached out to you for a report about what's happening there?
No. I'm the chairman of the National Sheriff Association Board of Security. I also sit on the Homeland Security Advisory Council as a sheriff. During the election, right after President Biden was elected, I was, myself and 3 other sheriffs from National Sheriff Association sat down with the Biden transition team. We talked about the border. We talked about the collaboration, the programs that are working. In my county, we have 100% prosecution for drug smugglers that go to prison. We've done some amazing work down here. I was very optimistic after that conversation that we're going to continue to move in the right direction. Within hours of President Biden taking election, he signed the executive orders, and he continues to reverse what the good things we've done on the southwest border. So I don't understand. It's frustrating. It's disrespectful that if you're going to sit and listen to us, bring us to the table and let's put policies and programs together. I'm all about that. But to not, and since this started, Greg, going back to your question, no, they have not spoke to me. I have spoke to Department of Homeland Security leadership. The first 2 conversations were, here's what's going on. We're not taking questions from sheriffs. Wow. We had a conversation a week ago. We asked some questions. They said they get back with us. So obviously this is a orchestrated plan that does not involve state and local leadership.
Wow. I hate that. Hopefully they'll see this, or someone will see this. All of you that are viewing us, you can let your elected official know what you just learned. On to this border crisis, 101, and it's a humanitarian crisis that has been imposed by this administration. 101,500 people that we know of crossed into this country last month. Chris?
You know what we need to be reminding our governors, especially our governors of border states, is that you have an ultimate responsibility to secure the rights and the liberties and the properties of the people within your state. And if the federal government is going to refuse to do the job that we have hired and delegated them the authority to do, that delegation is a temporary trust of authority from a higher power to a lower power. Our states are the higher power. The federal government is the lower power. And when they forget and refuse to do the job that we have asked them to do, that responsibility falls back on the states, back on the governors to do it without them or even in spite of them. And so the states at the borders need to be coming together and securing their own borders. And then every other state in the union must support these border states in securing their borders, because this leak affects everyone. Yeah. So we must come together as states to secure these borders in spite of the federal government's negligence. It's so true. Thomas Jefferson referred to the federal government as a foreign government to the states. And I know this, that a river has banks. If you don't have any banks on it, borders on a river, it becomes a swamp.
And the numbers are out, and it appears last month was the worst February ever when it came to illegal immigration and children. Reports indicate close to 9,500 unaccompanied minors were taken into custody during February at the southern border. According to the Washington Times, the massive surge in migrants is close to double last year's numbers. Total number of Border Patrol encounters with illegal immigrants during the month was more than 101,000. How's this for ironic? Not even Joe Biden's own appointees think his policies are working at our southern border.
Biden has made clear from day one that he wants to change our immigration system. Doing so means truly building back better, because we can't just undo 4 years of the previous administration's actions overnight. Those actions didn't just neglect our immigration system, they intentionally made it worse. When you add a pandemic to that, it's clear it will take significant time to overcome.
That is Roberta Jacobson, the former U.S. ambassador to Mexico and current Biden administration coordinator for the country's southern border. And just there, she admitted that President Joe Biden's immigration policies are causing a crisis at the border. While speaking at a White House media briefing, the admission from Jacobson comes as many child migrant facilities along the border are at capacity, while some people crossing into the country illegally are infected with the coronavirus. Greg, back to you.
All right. It's a crisis there. Is it not a crisis?
There's no question. Look, I've been there on the border with Sheriff Daniels, and what they are having to deal with is unbelievable. And yes, we are leaving, in many instances, the border unchecked because our agents are having to take care of the mass numbers of people who are in custody, who are in need of everything from medical care to simple things like food and clothing and the like. And it's just unbelievable that we, the United States of America, in just 3 months have reopened an absolute catastrophic situation on our southern border, to the extent that our border agents are no longer able to do their jobs. All the while, the cartels on the other side of the border are in control of every square inch of the border on that side. It's just inexcusable that we have put ourselves back in this kind of situation.
Let me show you a picture that he shared with us. This is a photo, that man with the dreaded assault rifle. That's not one of our agents. That's a cartel member in the United States with that weapon, and it's putting our people at risk. And then ironic, I show you a assault rifle coming across the border from Mexico to the United States, and they're up there trying to pass bills to take away Second Amendment rights. And I would remind people that there is a wall, and that wall is around the Congress building in which you serve every single day.
Senate Democrats passed the latest stimulus bill through the budget reconciliation process, meaning they only needed a simple majority for it to pass. Through this process, the Senate parliamentarian has the power to decide what stays in and what needs to come out.
In the pro-life things, this doesn't sound like the thing we voted for, does it?
Yeah, so one of the things that is unfortunately true, and as Senator Rand Paul was pointing out, that in budget reconciliation, it's not actually a budget. That is what you're supposed to do. In reconciliation, you just say, well, we're just going to try to get something passed so we have money we need, but then you can add whatever amendment or actually add on in this case, whatever other additional funding you want to do, you add it on. And this is where you get so many earmarks of different senators and different congressmen saying that my state needs this, or right. We've seen the bailout of California, New York, and we talked about this some even on yesterday's programs. This is a very ridiculous way to do it. This is something that politicians often find ways to be politicians. They find ways to get cover and to reward big money donors and constituents and big business. And so certainly this is not what the founding fathers intended. This is not the best thing for our nation. And this is why that as Christians, we have to become more engaged in the process so we can get more principled and ethical people there to do the right thing, because this is not the right thing.
You're absolutely right. And that's why this news exists, is because people are waking up to these things.
Greg, Senate Republicans have said that the country will pay a price after the passage of a $1.9 trillion stimulus bill along party lines Wednesday. Now, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said Wednesday afternoon that the bill was one of the worst pieces of legislation he has seen passed there in the time that he has been in the Senate.
The president will soon be signing the $1.9 trillion stimulus bill. I think the most distinct features are the following. Number one, it solved New York's budget problem. So finally, some good news for Governor Cuomo. Senator Schumer has solved his financial issues. They've also, by the way, solved the financial problems of San Francisco. They've also prevented state governments from lowering taxes. This is a classic example of big government Democratic overreach.
The 628-page measure represents Democrats' effort to bridle the catastrophic pandemic and revive the enfeebled economy, extending federal unemployment benefits and issuing $1,400 stimulus checks to millions of households. Okay, Greg. Well, Greg, now that the latest COVID-19 relief bill has passed both the House and the Senate, are you ready to hear what's really in it? As the Washington Times is reporting, in many ways, it's a massive expansion of the federal welfare state. And yes, there is COVID relief in the form of $1,400 stimulus checks for many Americans, but there's also $350 billion going to state and local governments, mostly to bail them out after years of mismanagement. $300 is being added to the weekly federal unemployment checks until September 6th. More than $125 billion is going to K through 12 schools. $86 billion is going to multi-employer pension plans. More than $30 billion for transit agencies and $35 billion for health insurance subsidies for people who buy insurance on Obamacare exchanges. And that is just some of what your tax dollars will be paying for on the $1.9 trillion bill dubbed by Democrats somehow COVID relief. Well, now that it has been passed by both the House and Senate, Joe Biden plans to sign that bill today, we are told. And of course, it's a big day for President Biden. In addition to signing the relief bill, he's also going to be making his first primetime address to the nation. In part, he will be talking about the pandemic on the one-year anniversary of the WHO announcement that it was worldwide.
Chris Ann Hall and Tim back in here, talk a little bit about some of these stories. When you look at this stimulus bill, or this, what was passed, I call it the bailout bill, blue state bailout bill. If you qualify, Americans will get $1,400 in their check. Chris Ann will come to you with this, but we're still paying for that. When New York is totally out of debt now, thanks to this, California, San Francisco is almost out of debt. Thank you, middle states. You've paid off blue states who didn't manage things right. Am I wrong?
You know, what's interesting, there's really two great dangers in this COVID relief bill for the private business and for the taxpayer. Number one, any business that has received, any church that's received the PPP money, the loan money, or any money at all, is subject to having the federal government pulling strings on them. We've already seen that happen here in Florida, where a Florida restaurant was confronted by the federal government after taking a PPP loan, and the federal government said they didn't like how the restaurant was redistributing tips. They were using a tip pool, and said that they had to pay back all that money with interest at once, or comply with the government's orders on how to run their business. That's going to happen to churches. That's going to happen to private businesses. This is a major government control of private business and private churches through the creation of this money and the taking of this money. The second danger that we have here is that the federal government will obviously be using the general welfare clause and as an excuse to give this money, which is ironic because the general welfare clause, according to our founders, was entered into the constitutional document to remind the federal government that they're not supposed to use federal power to enrich one state at the benefit of another. So this COVID relief bill is a direct violation of the general welfare clause, as it's engaging in redistribution of wealth from one state to another, which is pretty much what caused us to disregard the original Articles of Confederation from the get-go.
Yeah. All right, Tim, we bring you in on this. We're talking about original intent and founders. I want to get you in on this. Texas currently has $1 billion surplus in their coffers. Florida is in the black, not in the red. But all of these other states now are going to pay for basically New York and California.
Yeah, one of the things the founding fathers understood, they enshrined in the Constitution, was something that's a biblical truth. It's something that deals with morality, but it's individual responsibility, that they understood that you should be accountable for your actions, for your behavior, for your decisions. And what we are seeing is that this is, first of all, immoral, but when you are going to say somebody that's done a really good job, we're going to penalize you for that, we're going to take from you and give to somebody else, that's a problem. And just based on this $1.9 trillion relief package, if everybody got $1,400, which first of all, not everybody qualifies for that $1,400, although it's interesting, some of the people who do qualify, you have people in prison right now who are qualifying, who will receive this $1,400 relief package, although not all hardworking Americans will, but it's going to charge all hardworking Americans an additional tax of almost $5,000 per every American to get this paid off. The founding fathers were very anti the notion, as was already pointed out. They did not believe that one state should pay the penalty of another state's negligence or irresponsibility. And this is where we understand elections have consequences. The reason that we want Christians to be involved and engaged and elect moral people who have a constitutional perspective so that we can make wise decisions that benefit the state, that benefit individuals, but also that we're not going to penalize or tax somebody else for somebody else's irresponsibility. So much immorality in this stimulus package that presumably is going to be signed today. Certainly it's against the Founding Fathers' original intent, and definitely it's against biblical principles of morality.
Okay, you just said some Americans will get $1,400 back, but everybody else is going to pay $5,000. So you're paying back more than you're going to get. Did I hear that correct? Yes, that's right.
Yes. So when you average out this $1.9 trillion, the polls or the numbers that we've seen estimate that it will be more than $5,000 in additional taxes that will have to be paid in order to pay off this stimulus package. Because as we're running up debt right now, it's now over $30 trillion that America owes in debt that will have to be paid off at some point. And this is where a lot of times right now we are cheating the next generation. We are penalizing the next generation who will have to pay off this debt.
It reminds me of that thing I wrote one time. You can cancel at any time, simple, easy payments of only. Anyway, coming across the border from Mexico to the United States, and they're up there trying to pass bills to take away Second Amendment rights. And I would remind people that there is a wall, and that wall is around the Congress building in which you serve every single day. Let me pivot to H.R. 1, sir. It's the number one thing because it's number one, House Resolution 1. And can you tell us what that is about and how dangerous it is?
Yeah, sure. It's probably one of the most dangerous pieces of legislation that our nation has ever seen. By specific design, elections in this country are to be left up to the individual states, and that was by design. Our founders did not want elections to be centralized in the federal government. They did not want any foreign influence or anyone else being able to come into our country and through bribery or any other means that they had available to sway or to tip the scales of our elections if the federal government was in charge of it. And so in wisdom, that decision was spread to the individual states. Well, H.R. 1 would reverse all of that and would centralize, federalize all of our elections again. It has every horrible part of what was so disastrous in this past election in it. Things like universal mail-in ballots required to go to everyone on the voter registration files of every state. Now, we know that those voter registration files are at least 10 to or 5 to 10% inaccurate. So we're talking millions and millions of live ballots going to illegal voters. Also in H.R. 1 is zero voter identification required for all these ballots going out. It allows for ballot harvesting to take place. It puts up a standard where the taxpayers are actually paying for campaigns up to a 6-to-1 ratio. So your tax dollars could actually be used to fund the campaigns of candidates that you despise. I mean, this thing is just chock full of absolutely horrendous election laws that in essence would guarantee Democrats being in charge perhaps forever, if not for decades to come.
Yeah, it sounds like they want one-party rule. Let me bring in John Graves, CEO of Vision America. John's an attorney, ordained pastor, and Victory News contributor. John, foreign interference in elections. I've heard that somewhere before. I can't remember where I recall that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's just the classic hypocrisy here of we allege this against the former president and now we want to protect it if it happens again. Look at all the stories you just covered. Nancy Pelosi is saying, hey, we need to limit your right to your Second Amendment constitutional right to have a gun because it's for the children. And yet we're now creating a crisis for children at the border. They were raging about kids in cages. Now there's more of them and longer. Sex trade of kids that are coming across the border. They don't want a wall at the border, but they have a wall all over the D.C. They want illegals to have weapons, but they don't want citizens to have them. And what Jody Heiss just said, they don't want citizens to be the only one to vote. They want the people they're letting in to vote, they want illegals to vote, and they want to do the number one thing that creates the most fraud in voting, which is mail-in. Some countries have stopped it altogether because it's the number one chance of creating fraud. Right. It's just continued hypocrisy, and people are starting to wake up, hopefully starting to see that.
I believe they are.
And all this has happened in less than 3 months. It is a crisis of epidemic proportions. And to the extent that the Biden administration is calling on volunteers to go down there and help, listen, here's how you fix it. You go back to the Trump policies and we abide by the laws that are on the books, that there's a right way to come to this country. You do so legally. You don't cross our borders illegally. It is not rocket science to deal with the borders, but right now we have untold numbers of criminals, untold numbers of people with the pandemic, the virus that they're carrying, and they are waltzing into our country, a very dangerous situation.
Took a backseat to the signing of the $1.9 trillion stimulus bill in Joe Biden's first address to the nation on Thursday. On the same day the House passed the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2021, it calls for universal background checks on all commercial gun sales. The effort is part of a push for gun control now that Democrats control the Senate. Now, according to ABC News, some Republicans strongly objected to the expanded checks, one saying they're meant to turn law-abiding citizens into criminals. The bill passed by a vote of 227 to 203 with the support of 8 Republicans. Mike, back to you.
Thank you, Mike. I want to bring in Sheriff Mark Daniels from Cochise County. You heard those stories there. We have a wall. The wall there wasn't finished, but now we have a wall around Congress that's being guarded by soldiers. And you have ranchers that live along that border. If we lose the Second Amendment, we showed a photo you sent us of a cartel member armed with one of those scary black guns. I'm being sarcastic. What does the Second Amendment do to what you are able to do and people who live along that border if we lose that?
Well, what Speaker Pelosi is missing in that whole conversation is, first of all, the Second Amendment in the Constitution to protect yourself and others. Public safety is being omitted in that message too. You know, we shouldn't be worried about the guns as we should be worried about the criminals. Criminals will always have their hands on a gun, no doubt. We've seen that over time. It won't change. They don't follow the rules. The majority of society does a very good job of following the laws and rules of this country. And to mandate that we're going to start taking guns away, start sending that message is horrible, especially in the West. I think it's throughout the whole country, but especially in the West, where the first line of defense is the individual themselves. It takes me 2 hours to get some of my residents. By the time I get there, it's a crime scene. And we pick up the evidence. The bottom line, these people, I tell my ranchers, my rural folks, they have a legal and constitutional right to protect themselves, and I support that 100%.
Sheriff Mark Daniels from Arizona, sir, thank you so much for the information you brought to us. And know this, there are a lot of people praying for you, and you are the tip of the spear, and we appreciate everything that you're doing there. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Greg, and thanks to your viewers.
Georgia. Sir, I want to ask you a little bit about personally here. We're always trying to encourage people to get involved. Christians want to just sit back sometimes and just complain about everything we heard in the news, even things today. But there's a way to get involved. You were a pastor, I was told, before you became a congressman. Tell me real quickly about that.
Yes, I was a pastor for about 25 years and through a couple of battles that I did not go looking for, one with the IRS, the other with the ACLU, coming against our county and our church. I was kind of pushed into the public arena, and that just kind of, God began to redefine the direction of my life right now, going from there to a radio program that reached some 400 plus stations every day, dealing with Christian values in our country. And then from there to Congress. And, you know, I just encourage people to walk with God, give him all your heart. And you just never know the ways that he will open doors that you never really anticipated. And frankly, in my case, that was never even on my radar. But I'm grateful to be serving the people of the 10th District of Georgia now in our country, and standing not only for them, but standing for the King of Kings and standing for the principles upon which our country was founded. And I just encourage people to pray like they've never prayed before. The greatest need in our country is a spiritual awakening.
That's true.
That rests at the doors of the people of God across this country.
That's absolutely true. You know, they always told me about separation of church and state. Well, I'll say this, you are the church and you're in the state. And thank you for being there. And I'm sure you've had opportunity to minister to people while you've been in Congress. And I truly appreciate you doing that. How do you keep from becoming part of the swamp?
Well, it's the same way any believer keeps from being part of the swamp in their own world. The most important thing in my life is my relationship with Christ. And I literally sleep in my office. Other members do the same thing, but I have the cleaning crew come at 5 a.m. So I'm up at 4:45, go down, get showered up, and come back. And I have my time alone with the Lord, time in the Word and time in the prayer, and just asking God to prepare my heart for the day. So, when all's said and done, it's all a matter of keeping a pure heart and clean hands and run to the battle and trusting God to do for us what we cannot do on our own.
All right. That's got to be encouragement to you, John Graves. You're preaching this all the time for people to get involved.
Jody Heiss is a model we can hold up all across the country. A lot of times pastors, I just encouraged the pastor this week to do what Jody Heiss is doing. You can be the answer. Instead of just looking at all these, we talked about this, Greg, yesterday. What do? People are frustrated. They need to discern what's going on and know what to do. If you're a pastor, you either could run if God allows you to do that, or realize that you're raising up the next people that can lead as representatives in our republic. People like Jody Heiss. Who better to lead in the difficult spiritual darkness that is happening in our nation's capital and in many of our state capitals than someone who's grounded in God's Word and led by God's Spirit? So I'm just delighted to be on here with Jody Heiss and put him in front of many other people and say, wait a minute, it's us as citizen legislators. Trump wasn't a professional politician. You can be a Christian businessman maybe, or a pastor, or somebody who's devoted to that. You can be the difference in this country. And so to me, it's an incredible example.
A lot of people don't know this, but Muhlenberg, the guy who signed the Bill of Rights, was a pastor. And that's all throughout our history. Congressman, last thoughts before we go, 30 seconds.
Now, listen, I couldn't agree anymore. By definition, it's impossible to be salt and light if you're not engaged. And I think that's been a big problem with the body of Christ for a long time. We have been the problem by not being engaged, but we are also the solution. And may God help each of us to do that.
All right. Thank you, sir, for being with us today. And we'd love to have you back anytime. He's one of the good guys. He's at the tip of the spear there in Washington, D.C. So continue to pray for him. John Graves, I'll give you the last word, 30 seconds.
I would just echo the same thing I've already said. Be the change agent. The scripture that Congressman Heiss just referenced is Jesus said, if you've got light, and we do, you don't hide it under a bushel. You go get out there, but you've got to get out of hiding and go make a difference into this darkness. And so to me, it's an example, a practical example, a parable, if you will, of someone's life that shows all of our listeners, all of our viewers, you can be one of the people to do this.
And every single one of you.
And if you're not doing it, go get behind somebody who is.
There you go. And every single one of you can be light in the place that He's called you. God takes full-time ministers. He disguises them as police officers and puts them in a squad car. And He takes full-time ministers and disguises them as teachers and puts them in a classroom. Yes. You need to bloom where you're planted. Let God use you where you are right now.